If you watched the Pokemon anime from 2004 to 2006, you probably remember this.
Trainers, which one of these Pokemon evolves into sizeable?
And as such, you also probably remember this.
Okay, trainers, if you chose Arbok, you were right.
Needless to say, that's completely incorrect. This is Pokemon Trainer's Choice. This was the replacement of Who's That Pokemon for Pokemon Advanced Challenge and Pokemon Advanced Battle, 2 seasons of the Gen 3 anime. The format was simple. Going into the commercial break, Ash Ketchum himself would ask us, the viewers, a question. Now this question came from a variety of topics, but the one that was most used was, which of these Pokemon is best to fight against this other Pokemon? And they would give you a few choices, and then after the commercial break was over, Ash would come back, and he would tell you, hey trainers, if you guessed this Pokemon, you were correct. The problem here is that the correct answer the show would give us oftentimes was either blatantly false or one of multiple correct answers that the show didn't acknowledge at all. I've been seeing this one go around a lot lately, where Onyx is misspelled as O-N-Y-X instead of O-N-I-X. Now, O-N-Y-X is actually how a lot of people seem to have remembered Onyx's name being spelled forever, which it hasn't been. It's always been O-N-I-X. And this is either the only or one of very few times where it's been spelled with a Y, and it's clearly just an error. But between that and the sizeable one, I started to wonder how many of these Pokemon Trainer Choice segments actually had errors in them, because obviously it was not a one and done thing. I believe the Pokemon Trainer's Choice segment over 2 seasons aired 104 different questions. And out of these 104 questions, 28 of them have errors. And we're gonna go through every single one of them because I'm nothing if not a big fucking Pokemon nerd. Now we're gonna look at these in chronological order. We're gonna start from the top, just go through them one by one, so let's just jump into it. Now it's important to note that in the Trainer's Choice segments, they focus heavily and almost entirely on type matchups. That's what a Pokemon is going to have an advantage over another Pokemon means. That's what they're going for. I fully believe they never incorporated base stats and move pools and stuff like that into these questions because it was for kids. It was aimed at kids. Kids know the typings of the Pokemon, and that's pretty much all you really need to know in the first place. So by asking which Pokemon has an advantage over another Pokemon, they're just looking solely at types. Before we get started, you'll notice that each Trainer Choice I show has a red circle around one of the Pokemon. That circle is simply to denote which Pokemon they show deemed as the correct answer. Now enough ramble, you guys want to see what they fucked up, so let's just jump into it. We're gonna go chronologically from the first error to the last, so let's go. Pokemon Trainer's Choice aired its first segment at the start of Pokemon Advanced Challenge, which was the 41st episode of the Pokemon Advanced Generation series. The first error came at episode 42 when they asked which of these Pokemon was most effective against Mudkip. The answer they gave was Plusle, which does in fact have a type advantage against Mudkip, but so does Roselia. And Roselia also resists Mudkip's stab water moves. Seems to me, based on type matchups, Roselia is the best choice. Jumping ahead to episode 46, they asked which of these Pokemon was the best choice to fight against Camerupt. They said it was Nuzleaf, when in actuality, there really isn't a correct answer here. Every single one of these Pokemon have a weakness to Camerupt's typing. Now, for splitting hairs here, and you know I like to get technical with these things, Nuzleaf would probably be the best choice here based on type matchups, because unlike Magcargo, Nuzleaf only has a ×2 weakness to one of Camerupt's types, and unlike Beedrill and Magcargo, both of Nuzleaf's stab typings are neutral against Camerupt. But I'm more willing to bet that whoever wrote the question just didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Episode 48 asked which of these Pokemon was the best choice against Ninjask, in which they said Dugong. Now, Dugong does have an Ice type and is super effective against Ninjask, but Torkoal's Fire type is also super effective against Ninjask, and so is Nosepass's Stab Rock type moves. Plus, Nosepass's Rock moves would be quad effective against Ninjask's Bug Flying type, and Nosepass would resist Ninjask's Flying moves. In fact, Dugong's the only one here that takes neutral damage from both Bug and Flying, kind of making it the worst choice. Episode 52 asked which of Swampert, Taillow, or Torkoal would be the best against Shiftry, and they said Torkoal, which if you factor in typing and base stats, probably the best choice. But Pokemon Trainer's Choice only focuses on typing, and Taillow is a flying type, which is super effective against Shiftry's grass type. So this is a question that has multiple correct answers, and they just don't say that Taillow is also super effective against Shiftry. Honestly, I think it's a fucking miracle they didn't say it was Swampert. Episode 53 boggles my mind. They ask which of these Pokemon is best against Kirlia, to which they say Combuskin is the best answer, when Combuskin is the only Pokemon here that is actively weak to Kirlia's psychic typing. None of these Pokemon have a type advantage over Kirlia, but I think Togetic would be the best option as Kirlia is a special attacker, and Togetic's special defense is over double that of Graveler's, and Kirlia is pretty frail, so any attack's really going to do a lot of damage, so Togetic, I think, is the best answer here. Definitely not fucking Combuskin. Episode 56 is also remarkably false, as they say that of these three options, Seviper is the best choice to fight a Forretress. Seviper is a poison type. Forretress is part steel type. Steel is immune to poison. Forretress takes neutral damage from both electric and flying attacks, and all three of these Pokemon have a resistance to one of Forretress's typings. So I would say the best option here is probably Swellow, because Minun just kinda sucks. Also, they misspelled Forretress. It needs 3 R's instead of 2. It's Forre. Episode 57 says Surskit has the best matchup against Seedot, and while Surskit's bug typing is super effective against Seedot's grass, Delibird has 2 types that are super effective against grass, as well as a resistance to grass. The only justification here I can see is that by level up in Generation 3, Delibird only learns Present and needs other avenues like TMs and breeding to learn Ice and Flying type moves. But again, Trainer's Choice only cared about typing, so I don't think they were thinking that deep about it. Episode 59 asks which of these Pokemon is best against Manectric, to which they say Larvitar. Now, Larvitar is a ground type, but so is Swampert. And between you and me, Swampert is a lot better than Larvitar is, so I would say it's probably Swampert, but this is another example of one that has multiple correct answers. Here's another example of that. Episode 61 wants to know which of these Pokemon is best against Crawdon. Now, Chinchou's electric type does have type advantage against Crawdon's water, but Volbeat's here, and Volbeat's a bug type, which is good against Crawdon's dark type. Well, I guess Chinchou does have a water resistance. Okay, that one's not particularly egregious, but I'm still gonna put it in. Alright, this one's a little weird. Episode 62 wants to know which of these Pokemon is best against Wooper. Now, they said Spheal, who does have a water resistance, and 2 types that are neutral against Wooper, provided said Wooper doesn't have water absorb as an ability, but I digress. However, Zubat has a full immunity to Wooper's ground moves, as well as 1 type that is neutral against Wooper. Factoring in things other than type, I probably would rather fight a Wooper with a Spheal, considering it's bulkier and just has better moves than Zubat, but at the same time, Delcatty's better stats than Zubat and Spheal, so I don't really know about this, and I can't believe I'm contemplating ever using a Delcatty. Episode 65 ponders which of these Pokemon is best against Larvitar. Larvitar is a rock ground type, which means Trico's grass moves are going to be quad effective against it, but so are Carvanha's water moves. But if you factor in resistances, Trico has a ground resistance that Carvanha doesn't have, so I'll let it slide. But you're on thin fucking ice, Trico. Alright, this is the one that kicked all of this off. Episode 72 wants to know which of these Pokemon is best against Ariados, between Raichu, Onix, and Blaziken. They say Onix, who, as you know, is misspelled, but both Blaziken and Onix have 1 resistance against Ariados, as well as super effective typing. And also, Blaziken is just infinitely better than Onix in the first place. Onix is kinda hot garbage. Now, episode 74 is just an all-around disaster. Which of these Pokemon is best against Meditite? And they say Combuskin, where for the second time they're saying Combuskin is the best choice against a Psychic-type Pokemon. And so is Heracross, also weak to Psychic types. Beautifly has a type that's advantageous against Meditite's fighting type, as well as a double resistance to fighting, making it the obvious choice. But also, they labeled Beautifly as Nuzleaf. How the fuck does that get through? This is another example of a resistance being a technicality. Episode 76 wants to know which is best against an Illumise. Crobat is the best choice here, flying type. Poison has a resistance as well as flying to Illumise's bug type, but Togetic's also a flying type, and so also super effective against Illumise, also not a bad choice. I still think that they weren't really factoring in resistances, at least not that much, and just weren't thinking at all. I just think with things like this, that they should have just been very, very obvious about which ones are good and which ones are not, because then we don't even have this discussion about whether this is an error or whether they're using resistances as technicalities. I don't fucking know, man. Alright, here's the one that everybody knows. If you knew of one error in these trainer choice segments, you knew it was this one. I'd put good money on it. Episode 77 asks, which of these Pokemon evolves into Seviper? They say it's Arbok. Arbok did not, and still does not in present day, evolve into any other Pokemon. On top of that, Seviper is a single stage Pokemon. It does not evolve, it did not evolve from anything. Seviper is just Seviper. Now you might say, and I've been admitting it too, that I've been a little nitpicky about some of these, especially when they come to resistances. And you may say, well, maybe they factored in base stats, and move pools, and resistances, and whatnot, to which I say, no! This question, this one right here, this is the living proof that the people writing these questions had no idea what they were talking about, no connection to the source material, and did not care to fact check any of the stuff they were saying. Even as a fucking 7-year-old child watching this for the first time, I saw this and thought to myself, no, Arbok doesn't evolve into anything. Even I knew when I was like 7 and an idiot. I mean, I'm still kind of an idiot, but as a bigger idiot. Episode 78 is just blatantly wrong. Which one of these is best against Ludicolo? Mightyena and Duskull both have fully neutral type matchups against Ludicolo, but they go with Camerupt, who is quad weak to Ludicolo's water type. What? Episode 81. Which of these Pokemon is best against Tyro? HJ Exploud, who, along with Celio, is weak to Tyrogue's fighting type, instead of Dustox, who is double resisted to it. And also Dustox learns psychic moves by level up, which they don't factor in, but I think is funny. Also, Celio is mislabeled as Nuzleaf, and that's 2 Pokemon in the top slot mislabeled as Nuzleaf, so whoever was editing just clearly forgot to change that template in post. Okay, I will admit this one is me getting nitpicky again. Episode 82 wants to know which of these Pokemon is best against Sunflora. They say Venomoth, who has 2 type advantages and a double resistance to grass, but Ghastly also has a resistance and a type advantage. Again, nitpicky, but I really feel like if they wanted to achieve what they were going for, they needed to make these answers very, very clear. Make no other choice on the board have a type advantage, so that the target audience of children doesn't get confused when they go to play the game. That way a child doesn't have a Ghastly against its Sunflora and think, ooh, I remember that Trainer's Choice segment that, Ghastly, I guess, is not a very good matchup against Sunflora, so I'm not gonna use it. Dumb. Alright, episode 84 asks which is best against a Magby. They say Lombre, who does have water moves and is in fact super effective against Magby, but Solrock's rock type is also super effective, and also Solrock has a resistance to Magby's fire attacks, so you tell me which is the actual better matchup. This one's fun, because episode 85 asks which Pokemon is best against Baltoy, a ground psychic type. And they say Lapras, who, water type, is super effective against ground, but so is Meganium's grass type. And Ledian's bug type is also super effective against Baltoy's psychic type, as well as Ledian's flying type having an immunity to Baltoy's ground. Between Ledian having an immunity, Meganium having a resistance, and Lapras not having any of them, Lapras kinda the worst choice based on type matchups, and Ledian the best one, which is weird to say, because Ledian fucking sucks. Which is a real shame, because I love Ledian's design. A lot. I wish it was better. Episode 90, which Pokemon is best against Spoink? And I'll tell ya, it sure as fuck ain't Makuhita like the show suggests. It also ain't Qwilfish, they're both weak to Psychic moves. It's Swampert of these two. Swampert doesn't even have an advantage against it, it just isn't weak to it. Episode 91, the answer they give here is correct. They say Swinub is the best against Flaffy, but Flaffy is misspelled. It's 2 A's, 2 F's. F-L-A-A-F-F-Y. That's the only error here. But remember this one. It'll come back. Episode 97 wants to know which of the Gen 3 starters would be best against a pairing of Plusle and Minun, to which they say it's Mudkip, who is the only Pokemon here that is weak to electric type moves. Now, if Mudkip was evolved, it would have a ground type and be not only immune, but super effective against them. But Mudkip itself is just a water type, making this completely wrong. Treecko's the best option because Plusle and Minun take neutral damage from all 3 of these Pokemon, and Treecko's the only one that would resist their attacks. I told you to remember that Flaffy one for a reason. Episode 104 is correct answer, however, again, Flaffy is misspelled, missing an F. Episode 106 gives us a very different question to the ones we've seen before. They ask which of these Pokemon would last longest against a psychic attack. Now they say it's Teddiursa, who takes neutral damage. Okay, so does Misdreavus. That's fine. Or at least it would be, if Poochyena wasn't sitting right fucking there as a dark type completely immune to psychic moves. How did this one even get through? What was the logic here? The funniest part about this is that 33 episodes later in episode 139, the question is which Pokemon would not be affected by the move Psychic, where the correct answer is Mightyena, which is Poochyena's evolution. It's stuff like this that makes me confident that they were not factoring resistances into any of these questions because they couldn't get a fucking immunity right. Ridiculous. Alright, this is probably my most nitpicky one, and if you really think about it, it's probably not an error at all, but I'm gonna talk about it because I want to. Which of these Pokemon is not a water type? They say Castform, which is right. He's not a water type, it's a normal type. But Castform can also become a water type in the ring. It's not an evolution, it's a form change. Castform itself can become a water type. So this is another just one of those times I feel like they should have just used a Pokemon that has no argument at all that it could be a water type, like a Linoone. Or if they wanted to get real tricky about it, they could have used Azurill. Because despite what you might think, Azurill is just a plain normal type or fairy type if you're Gen 6 onwards. It doesn't even have the capacity to itself be a water type. So it would have just made a lot more sense, at least to me. Third time's the charm. The answer here is correct. Once again, though, they misspelled Flaffy with 2 F's instead of 3 total. Guess they didn't proofread that one. Here's another tricky one. Episode 116 is another one of those questions that has 2 correct answers. It asks which of these Pokemon is super effective against its own type. And the answer they give is Salamence, which is correct, as Dragon is super effective against Dragon. But Graveler is a rock and ground type, rock being weak to ground, and thus Graveler would be super effective against itself. Now, I think the question they were trying to ask here was which of these Pokemon has a type that is super effective against that same type. But with the wording of which Pokemon is super effective against its own type, while ground isn't super effective against ground, a ground rock dual type has an advantage over another ground rock dual type. It's a little iffy what they were going for here, but I am still going to count it as an error, because fuck you, I feel like it. Alright, last one. Episode 132 asks a question that was only seen once. This was the only time it was asked, and this is the only trainer's choice where there are only 2 options instead of 3. They ask, if Curly and Arcanine were to fight, which would have the advantage? Now we know by this point of the trainer's choice, they always focused solely on type matchups. But neither of these Pokemon have an advantage against the other. They're both a neutral matchup. The answer they give is Arcanine, which is a pretty clear correct answer if you're factoring in base stats and stuff. It's just an all-around better Pokemon. So I really don't know if they thought Arcanine had like a type advantage, or if they actually were looking at base stats and moves for one single question or something. I have no idea. But it all matches with every single error we've seen, and every other correct answer is focusing solely on type matchups. So I'm counting this as one last error. Alright, now before we go, I want to go over a few other ones that were correct for the time, but with the addition of new types and new Pokemon have retroactively become incorrect. Because you know someone somewhere out there who has only grown up with the more recent generations is gonna see this and think, oh, but you forgot this one with this Pokemon. But that Pokemon of that type didn't exist at the time of the airing, and therefore they couldn't have known at all that it would be wrong in the future, and you know what, that's fine. But I'm gonna go over them just for the fun of it, and we'll see what's become wrong in recent years. This first one, episode 47, says Weezing is the best choice against Silcoon, which was correct. But with the addition of the fairy type however many years later, Marill is just as much of a good choice against Silcoon, because it now has a resistance to bug. Though honestly, anything's good against Silcoon. Silcoon fucking sucks. It's a cocoon Pokemon. They're all garbage. Remember this one that I went on about for a while? Well, come Gen 6 and Togetic becoming a fairy flying type, it's equally as resistant to Illumize's bug moves as Crobat is, making them equally good answers. Episode 99 asks which of these Pokemon does not evolve, and at the time, Tangela was correct because Tangrowth didn't exist until Generation 4, one generation later. This one where Flaffy is misspelled also completely changes with the addition of fairy typing. It asks which Pokemon is not a normal type, and Flaffy's the right answer, but come Generation 6 and fairy type, none of these Pokemon are normal types. 2 of them become fairies. Episode 124, which Pokemon stays the same type throughout its entire evolution line. The entire Ralts line in Generation 3 does stay pure Psychic type, but upon Galade's introduction in Generation 4, Ralts is able to gain a Fighting type, making this one retroactively incorrect. This one that I counted as the last error also changes a lot come Generation 6, when Kirlia gains a resistance to Arcanine's Fire-type moves, making it the better type matchup after Fairy-type was introduced. And finally, the last one, episode 138, once again asks which Pokemon does not evolve. And Ursaring is the correct choice for the time, as Ursaluna did not exist until Pokemon Legends Arceus, something like more than 15 years later, I think. I feel old, man. Jesus. Okay, here's a bonus one for you. This one is completely right. Episode 50 says Geodude is the best choice against Magneton. Well done, show. Geodude does have quad effectiveness against Magneton and is immune to its electric attacks. However, I'm going to make the case for Lantern here. So let's start with type matchups. Geodude is immune to electric, but he does have a weakness to steel, whereas Lantern takes neutral damage from electric and has a double resistance to steel. However, if Lantern has the Volt Absorb ability, it doesn't have just a double resistance, but it also gains an immunity that heals it. Geodude's saving grace here in Gen 3 is that all steel moves are physical, and Magneton's physical attack is half that of its special attack. Not to mention Geodude's physical defense is way better than its special defense. But also, Magneton learns no damaging steel moves in Generation 3. So yeah, in Gen 3, Geodude's the right pick, the show got it correct, but for the sake of argument, let's jump ahead 2 generations to Generation 5 where some things have changed. Namely, the physical special split in Gen 4 gives a Gen 5 Magneton access to a special-based flash cannon, and Geodude's special defenses are so pitifully poor that it will die in one hit. Unless Geodude has Sturdy as its ability, in which case it will survive on 1 HP, letting it get off an Earthquake, killing Magneton. Unless Magneton also has Sturdy as its ability. Now, I specify Gen 5 here because Gen 5 is when Sturdy got its buff to not only protect Pokemon from a one-hit KO move like Guillotine or Fissure, but any move that will take it from full HP to 0. It will always survive on 1 health net. Before Generation 5, that was not the case. So there we are at a 1v1, both Pokemon at 1 HP. Magneton has more than triple the speed of Geodude and thus will go first and kill Geodude outright. Magneton will win that fight. So let's talk Lantern versus Magneton here. Neither Pokemon can do super effective damage to each other at all. And again, with ideal abilities, Magneton will survive at least 1 move, and Lantern will absorb any electric move Magneton throws at it, healing itself. Lantern's stab moves are at least neutral damage against Magneton, whose special defense is not as high as its physical defense. So I do think Lantern will take the win on this one over Magneton in this case. Magneton is 3 base points of speed faster than Lantern, so it has a slightly higher chance of getting that extra attack off. But again, its stab moves can't do anything to Lantern, and it has no way of dealing super effective damage. And Lantern is naturally bulky with its high HP stat, so I think Lantern's going to take this one. Again, in Gen 3, when the show was made, Geodude is the choice here, but I do think Lantern still has an argument to be made, provided all the pieces land in the right spot. So I'm not counting that as an error, I just wanted to make the argument, just for the fun of it. That is every error in Pokemon Trainer's Choice that I could find. If you somehow find another one, and I've parsed through this a few times now, please let me know, because I don't know how the hell I would have missed it. And again, I know some of these are kind of technicalities, nitpicky, but I think my arguments make sense. Regardless of the resistances and whatnot, they had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. So if you enjoyed this, please consider, the subscription. Also, you might like this. I got a podcast with my cousin called To Kill a Delibird for re-watching the Pokemon anime, and I have a very fun time pointing out every time the anime gets something wrong in relation to the games. It's a great time. It's a lot like this, I guess. So come join us there. You can find that wherever podcasts are downloaded, and I hope to see you there. Otherwise, follow me on Twitch. Twitch.tv/HydroLeech. Play some Pokemon. It's a fun time. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else to talk about. You guys have a good day, and please tell me you know how to properly spell Onyx's name now, or else this was all for nothing.